I should have known something was wrong the moment a stranger with arms sculpted like Greek marble asked if I needed help carrying my boxes. Strangers don't usually appear out of nowhere in small college towns, especially not the kind that smell like cedar and danger. I was sweaty, frustrated, and half convinced my landlord had cursed me with stairs on purpose. My new apartment was on the 3rd floor, and every box I carried felt heavier than the last. Books mostly, because what else did a kid like me have? Certainly not furniture worth bragging about. Just boxes of paperbacks, thrift store mugs, and a cheap mattress that had already left an imprint of my spine. Need a hand? His voice came low, smooth, like someone who already knew the answer. I turned, and there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man you'd swear was lost from a cologne commercial. His sleeves were rolled, veins running down his forearms, his jaw shadowed with a day's worth of stubble. He had a smirk that was both kind and dangerous. Yeah, that'd be great. My voice cracked, betraying me. He lifted the box from my arms as if it were filled with feathers instead of 20 hardcover books. The sight of his hands gripping the cardboard shouldn't have made my chest feel tight, but it did. Maybe it was the sweat dripping down my temple, maybe it was the late August heat, or maybe it was him, too close, too casually heroic. We carried the box together up the first flight of stairs, my heartbeat louder than my footsteps. "I'm Lucas," I muttered, because silence was worse than humiliation. He glanced at me, one brow slightly raised. Adrian. Simple. Strong. Like a name that belonged in a novel I'd never be brave enough to write. By the time we reached the 3rd floor, my arms were jelly, but he wasn't even breathing hard. He set the box down in my empty living room, glanced around at the bare walls and mismatched carpet, and nodded. "Not bad. Needs a couch." I laughed, nervous and awkward. "You offering one?" The corner of his mouth twitched. "Maybe." I didn't know then that this man, this stranger with the body of a soldier and the eyes of someone who had lived through storms, was about to rearrange my entire world. The first time it really hit me was 3 days later. My first day of classes at Hartwell University. I had my coffee, my notebook, and that nervous excitement that comes with pretending to be an adult. I slid into the lecture hall for English Literature 402, Advanced Studies in Romanticism. I was late, of course. And there, standing at the front of the room, in a fitted black shirt that should have been illegal, was Adrian. Professor Adrian Cole. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought I might pass out in front of 50 students. His eyes swept the room like a tide until they found mine. For the briefest second, his mouth curved, not into a smile, not quite, but into recognition. And then it was gone, replaced by the firm neutrality of a man who knew exactly where the line was drawn. "Take a seat," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. I nearly dropped my coffee. I slid into a chair in the back row, gripping my pen so tight my knuckles went white. What the hell was happening? Of all the people in this college town, of all the professors I could have ended up with, why him? Why the stranger who had carried my books like it was nothing? Why the man whose arms had brushed mine and made me wonder, just for a reckless second, if I was allowed to feel that? As he lectured, his voice steady, passionate, I couldn't hear half the words. I only saw the man who had stepped into my life like a storm. And as if fate enjoyed tormenting me, it didn't stop there. That night, I heard a knock at my apartment door. I opened it, expecting maybe my neighbor or a delivery I didn't order. Instead, it was Adrian. He leaned against the doorframe, casual, dangerous in the way a lit match is dangerous when you're standing in a room full of gasoline. "I didn't know," I blurted. "About you. About this." His gaze flickered, the faintest shadow of conflict in his eyes. Neither did I. The hallway felt too narrow, too filled with heat. You can't just show up here, I whispered, though my chest betrayed me with its desperate rise and fall. I was checking in, he said simply. You're new in town. I figured you might need someone to show you around. That someone can't be my professor. Silence stretched between us, tense as a pulled bowstring. You're right, he finally said, his voice low, but sometimes right doesn't matter. And then he walked away, leaving me at the door with my pulse still racing and my world unraveling. The following weeks were torture. Every lecture was a war. I tried to focus on Byron, on Shelley, on Keats, but all I could think about was Adrian's voice, Adrian's hands, Adrian's eyes that lingered a fraction too long. He never crossed the line in class, never let anyone see, but sometimes, when he handed me back an essay, when he passed me in the hall, his fingers brushed mine, subtle and fleeting, but enough to burn. I hated it, craved it. One rainy evening, when the campus was nearly deserted, I found myself trapped under the library's archway as the storm poured down. And then he appeared beside me, his jacket damp, his hair darker with rain. You'll get sick if you wait here, he said. Better than walking with you? I shot back, though my voice lacked bite. His laugh was soft, disbelieving. You think I don't feel it too? Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling after it. My breath caught. This is wrong, I whispered. I know. His eyes searched mine, raw, stripped of all the professor's authority, all the stranger's confidence. Just a man caught in the same fire as me. And maybe it was the storm, maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was the way his voice cracked just slightly, but I stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his breath, close enough that if the world ended right there, I would have died knowing what it meant to want someone so badly it hurt. His hand lifted, almost touching my face, then stopping. His restraint was unbearable. Lucas, he murmured, like a prayer. I leaned in, and then the library doors burst open behind us, breaking the spell, flooding the moment with harsh fluorescent light. We stepped apart instantly, both breathing too hard, pretending we hadn't just been on the verge of shattering everything. But the truth was undeniable. We had already crossed a line, even without touching. And there was no way back. That was only the beginning. Because secrets have a way of unraveling, and desire, once ignited, is almost impossible to extinguish. And as I stood in that storm, watching Adrian walk away into the rain, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. I wasn't afraid of him being my professor. I was afraid of how much I already needed him. I told myself 100 times I wouldn't let it happen again. No stolen glances, no lingering silences, no letting my chest tighten every time Adrian said my name in class. But lies have a way of sounding convincing when they're whispered in the dark. It started small, like all dangerous things do. A question after class. A glance too long in the hallway. An email reply that felt more personal than academic. And then one night I stayed late in the library. My notes spread across the desk, rain tapping against the tall arched windows. I tried to focus on my essay about romanticism. Instead, my pen shook with exhaustion. I was losing myself in half-formed sentences when a voice cut through the silence. You're still here. I turned, and there he was, Adrian, dressed in a charcoal coat, his hair slightly damp, his expression unreadable. I could ask you the same, I muttered. He stepped closer, each movement deliberate, until he stood on the other side of the desk. I was returning a book, and now I see a student pushing himself too hard. I don't push hard enough, I said, the words spilling before I could stop them. Not like you expect. His brow furrowed. That's not true. Isn't it? I looked down at my paper, ashamed of the raw edge in my voice. For a moment, the only sound was the rain. And then softer, Lucas, you're more capable than you think. Hearing my name in his voice, it undid me. I lifted my gaze, and our eyes locked. The air thickened, the kind of silence you feel in your bones. He leaned forward, his hand resting near my scattered notes, close enough that if I reached just 2 inches, our fingers would touch. I shouldn't be here, I whispered. I know, his jaw tightened, but I am. I could feel it then, the war raging inside him, the same one inside me. Logic, morality, the rules we both knew by heart. And underneath, the pull of something neither of us could silence. If the universe had mercy, it would have ended there. But mercy was never part of our story. The night we crossed the line was colder than it should have been for September. It happened after a departmental lecture. A visiting scholar had spoken on forbidden love in romantic poetry, how writers like Keats and Shelley masked their desires in metaphor, hiding truths the world wasn't ready to hear. When it ended, I left the hall dazed, my chest buzzing with restless energy, and Adrian was there, outside under the lamplight, waiting. He didn't speak at first, neither did I. The silence stretched, heavy with words unspoken. Finally, he said, "Walk with me." I shouldn't have. God, I shouldn't have. But my feet moved anyway. We walked down quiet streets, leaves crunching underfoot, the town alive only with distant headlights and the hum of street lamps. We didn't touch, but the space between us pulsed with everything we weren't saying. When we reached the river, he stopped. The water shimmered with moonlight, restless and endless. "This has to stop," he said finally, his voice hoarse. I swallowed hard. "Then why are you here?" His head dropped, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Because every time I try to stay away, I end up back where you are." I froze, his words cutting through me like lightning. And then he looked at me, not with restraint, not with the professor's distance, but with raw hunger. That was all it took. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was me, maybe it was him. But suddenly his hand was at the back of my neck, pulling me forward, and my lips crashed against his. The world exploded. His kiss was fire, rough, desperate, like he had been starving and finally let himself eat. My hands clung to his shirt, terrified he'd vanish, terrified I'd wake up. He pressed me against the cold stone railing by the river, his body solid, unyielding. When he finally pulled back, both of us gasping, his forehead rested against mine. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "I don't care," I breathed. "I can't pretend anymore." His lips found mine again, softer this time, aching with a tenderness that made my chest ache. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. After that night, everything changed. We didn't talk about it, not out loud, but in the quiet spaces, the way his hand brushed mine when no one was looking, the way his eyes softened when I raised my hand in class, the way he lingered when we passed in the hallway. We were no longer professor and student. We were something dangerous, something alive. We carved out stolen hours like thieves. A coffee shop 2 towns over, where no one knew us. An abandoned classroom after dark, the windows fogged, our breaths reckless. My apartment, where the world narrowed to the heat of his skin and the sound of his voice breaking as he whispered my name. But secrets are heavy. They press down, suffocating. I lived in 2 worlds. The public one, where I was just another student scribbling notes, and the hidden one, where my life pulsed with forbidden love. Sometimes, in the quiet after, I'd catch the shadow in his eyes, the weight he carried. "This could ruin us both," he said once, his hand tracing idle patterns on my bare shoulder. I turned to him, desperate, aching. "Then why don't we stop?" He looked at me, pained. "Because I'd rather risk everything than lose you." And those words, God, those words, they branded me. But the world has sharp ears for secrets. It started with whispers. A classmate noticing how often I lingered after lecture. A TA remarking that I seemed to get special attention. Little things harmless alone, but together dangerous. Then came the night that changed everything. I was leaving Adrian's office late, my shirt still rumpled, my lips still swollen from kisses I shouldn't have stolen. The hallway was dark, but not empty. "Lucas," I froze. It was Ethan, another student, sharp-eyed, too observant for his own good. His gaze flicked from me to the door behind me, suspicion written all over his face. "Long night with Professor Cole?" His tone was mocking, but underneath curiosity burned. My stomach dropped. I forced a laugh, desperate. "Research." He wanted me to check some sources for my essay. Ethan didn't look convinced. His smirk deepened. "Sure. Research." And just like that, the ground beneath me cracked open. From that night on, fear threaded through everything. Every glance felt like scrutiny, every whisper in the hallway like accusation. Adrian noticed. "You're quieter," he said one afternoon, studying me across the desk in his office. "People are starting to notice," I admitted, my voice breaking. His jaw tightened. "Then we'll be careful, more careful." But I knew even careful wasn't enough. Because secrets don't stay secrets forever. Yet even in fear there was love. One night, lying in his arms, the world outside muffled and distant, I whispered, "Do you regret it?" His breath was warm against my hair. He didn't answer right away, and for a moment, my chest clenched with terror that he'd say yes. Finally, his voice came low, steady. "I regret the risk. Not you. Never you." And I believed him. Even if the world burned around us, I believed him. But the storm was coming. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before someone struck the match. I had always thought secrets made you feel powerful, like you were holding something the world could never touch. But the truth was uglier. Secrets ate at you from the inside, turning every laugh into paranoia, every glance into suspicion. The morning after Ethan saw me outside Adrian's office, I couldn't focus in class. My hands shook as I scribbled notes, my eyes darting every time someone whispered or chuckled in the row behind me. And Ethan, God, Ethan sat 3 rows down, leaning back in his chair, smirking every time our eyes met. He didn't need to say anything. His silence was a noose around my neck. Adrian kept his composure flawlessly at the front of the room. His voice steady, his gestures sharp, but I knew he felt it too. His eyes flicked toward me once, just once, and the softness there nearly broke me. After class, I packed my things as fast as I could, desperate to get away. But Ethan caught me in the hall. "Lucas," he drawled, blocking my path. "Busy night again?" I froze, the blood draining from my face. He leaned in, his voice dropping low. "Relax. I'm not gonna tell anyone. Not yet." I swallowed. "There's nothing to tell." His smirk widened. "Sure, whatever you say." And then he walked off, leaving me trembling in the middle of the hallway. My stomach knotted. That night, I told Adrian everything. We sat in my apartment, the lights dim, the world outside muffled by autumn wind. His hands gripped his knees, his jaw tight as I recounted every word Ethan said. Blackmail, Adrian muttered, his voice sharp. Not yet, I whispered. But he knows. I saw it in his eyes. Adrian ran a hand over his face, sighing deeply. I knew this would happen eventually. Then what do we do? My voice cracked. What if he tells someone? Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze burning. We stay calm. If we panic, he wins. He doesn't have proof. He only has suspicion. But what if suspicion is enough? Adrian's hand reached for mine, warm, grounding. Then we fight. Together. The way he said it, steady, unflinching, should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me because fighting meant we were already preparing to lose. The days blurred. Classes, essays, lectures. All of it felt like background noise against the roaring storm inside me. Every time Ethan smirked at me, I felt the walls closing in. Every time Adrian brushed past me in class, pretending not to know me, my heart ached with longing and fear. Then came the rumor. I overheard it in the cafeteria. 2 students whispering, voices sharp with intrigue. They say Professor Cole is a little too close with one of his students. Which one? A pause, then a laugh. The quiet kid, brown hair, always sits near the back. My stomach dropped. My hands shook so badly I spilled my coffee. I didn't wait to hear more. I grabbed my bag and ran, my chest heaving, my vision blurring. By the time I reached my apartment, tears burned in my eyes. I slammed the door shut, leaning against it, gasping for air. The secret was no longer ours. It was a wildfire spreading fast, devouring everything. When Adrian came that night, his face was grim. I heard, he said simply. I collapsed onto the couch, my head in my hands. It's my fault. I should have been more careful. No, his voice was sharp, cutting through my panic. He knelt in front of me, his hands gripping mine. This isn't your fault. It's mine. I should have walked away from the beginning. I shook my head violently. Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare. His eyes softened, pain etched in every line of his face. Lucas. And then he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly it hurt. I'm not letting them take this from us, he murmured into my hair. Not now. Not ever. But the world doesn't care about vows whispered in the dark. 2 days later, I was called into the dean's office. The secretary's voice was polite but clipped, her eyes unreadable as she told me to wait inside. My chest felt like it might crack open as I sat in the stiff chair, my hands clammy. The dean entered a moment later, a tall man with cold eyes and a voice like stone. Lucas, he said, settling behind his desk. I'll get straight to the point. Concerns have been raised about your relationship with Professor Cole. My heart stopped. There is no relationship, I said quickly, too quickly. His gaze pinned me like a blade. Students talk. Faculty notice. I need the truth, for your sake as much as his. My throat burned. My hands shook, but I forced the lie. He's my professor. Nothing more. The silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Finally, the dean nodded slowly. Very well. But understand this, Lucas. If there is something you're not telling me, it will come out. And when it does, the consequences will be severe. I stumbled out of his office, my chest hollow, my body trembling. When I told Adrian, his face was pale, his eyes hard. They're circling, he said, his voice low. Looking for blood. What do we do? I whispered. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, We survive. But survival meant choices. Ugly ones. Adrian began to distance himself in public. No more lingering glances, no more subtle touches. In class, his eyes skipped over me as if I didn't exist. cut deeper than any rumor because I knew it wasn't indifference, it was sacrifice. At night, though, in the safety of my apartment, he held me like he was terrified of losing me. His kisses were urgent, desperate, as if each one might be the last. "This isn't sustainable," I whispered once, my cheek pressed against his chest. "I know," his voice cracked, "but I can't let go. Neither could I." And then the breaking point. It was late October, the air sharp with cold. I was walking across campus when I heard raised voices near the faculty building. Curiosity pulled me closer. And there he was, Adrian, cornered by Ethan and another student. "You think no one sees it?" Ethan sneered, his voice carrying. "You think you can just sneak around with him and get away with it?" Adrian's jaw was tight, his fists clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know enough," Ethan shot back. "And if the dean hears it from me instead of finding proof himself, maybe I'll get a little credit." Rage boiled in my chest. Without thinking, I stepped forward. "Leave him alone," I shouted. All three turned, their eyes locking on me. Ethan smirked, triumph flashing across his face. "Well, speak of the devil." I froze under his gaze, my heart slamming against my ribs. Adrian's eyes met mine, filled with fear, warning, love, all tangled together. And in that single terrible moment, I knew the secret was no longer ours. That night, when Adrian came to my apartment, his face was grave. "It's only a matter of time now," he said quietly. I sat on the bed, numb. "So what do we do?" He sat beside me, his hand covering mine. "We hold on. Until the end, we hold on." His voice broke then, just slightly, and I realized Adrian Cole, the man who carried my boxes, the professor who commanded lecture halls, the lover who held me like a lifeline, was just as terrified as I was. And somehow that made me love him more. But love wasn't enough to stop the storm. And as the days shortened and the air grew colder, I could feel it pressing in on us, the inevitable collapse, the reckoning we could no longer outrun. The storm finally broke on a gray November morning. I had barely stepped into the cafeteria when the campus email alert buzzed my phone. My heart stopped at the subject line: Mandatory Academic Conduct Hearing, Professor Adrian Cole. My vision blurred. The whispers started before I could move. Students turned, eyes sharp with curiosity, pity, or glee. The rumors were no longer whispers. They had become truth, official and sanctioned. When I stumbled out into the cold, my chest heaving, Adrian was already waiting by the library steps. His jaw was set, his eyes steady. "It's happening," I whispered. He nodded once. "I know." We stood there, the world rushing around us. Students laughing, leaves scattering in the wind. But for us, time stopped. His hand brushed mine, a fleeting touch no one else would notice. "We'll face it," he said softly. "Together." The hearing was scheduled 3 days later. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. Every hour dragged like a lifetime. Every glance from a stranger a dagger. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Adrian tried to stay strong, but I saw the wear in his eyes, the weight pressing on his shoulders. On the eve of the hearing, he came to my apartment. "Lucas," he said, standing in the doorway, his face pale but determined. "We need to talk." My chest tightened. Don't say it. Don't you dare say it." "I have to," he murmured, stepping closer. "If I admit it, if I take the blame, you'll be safe. They'll go after me, not you." "No," my voice broke. I grabbed his shirt, desperate. "You don't get to protect me by destroying yourself." His hands cupped my face, trembling. "You don't understand your future. My future means nothing without you." The words ripped out of me before I could stop them. Tears burned down my cheeks. If you go down alone, then what was this for? What was any of this for? He froze, staring at me, his own eyes shining. Then he pulled me into him, kissing me like it was the last time, like he was trying to memorize me. Then we face it, he whispered against my lips. Together. The hearing room smelled like old wood and fear. A panel of faculty and administrators sat at the front, their faces grim. Adrian sat to one side, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. I sat behind him, my hands clenched so tightly my nails cut into my palms. The dean cleared his throat. Professor Cole, allegations have been made regarding an inappropriate relationship with a student. Do you deny these claims? The silence was suffocating. My heart pounded. Everyone waited for his denial, for him to bury it, for him to lie. But then Adrian stood. Slowly, deliberately, he turned to face them. I will not deny it. Gasps rippled through the room. My chest seized. Adrian's voice was calm, steady. Yes, I developed a relationship with a student. I broke the rules. But I will not let you reduce this to something sordid or shameful. What we share is not a scandal. It is love. The word hung in the air, electric, undeniable. The dean's face hardened. Do you realize what you're admitting to? The consequences. I know. Adrian's eyes flicked to me, softening. And I accept them. I couldn't stay silent. My body moved before my brain caught up. I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. It's not just him, I said, my voice trembling but loud enough to echo. I'm part of this too. I chose him. I wanted him. And I won't let you destroy him for loving me. The panel erupted in whispers, shock vibrating through the room. The dean tried to silence me, but I didn't care. You want the truth? The truth is he's the first person who ever made me feel seen. The first person who ever looked at me and didn't just see another face in a classroom. And maybe it's forbidden, maybe it's wrong in your eyes, but it's real. And I won't be ashamed of it. My voice cracked on the last word, tears spilling freely now. Adrian's gaze found mine, and in that moment, I knew we had already won, no matter what happened next. The decision came hours later. Adrian was suspended indefinitely, pending further review. He would likely lose his position, maybe his career. But he didn't look broken. He looked free. And when we walked out of that room, students and faculty staring, he reached for my hand. For the first time in public, he didn't hide. His fingers laced with mine, warm, steady, defiant. The whispers turned into silence. And then something I never expected. A clap. One student, then another. Slowly, the sound spread until the hall filled with applause. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough to tell us we weren't alone. Winter came, sharp and merciless. Adrian packed up his office, his books, his carefully arranged life in cardboard boxes. This isn't the end, he told me, his hand resting on the last stack. And he was right. It wasn't. Because endings aren't always disasters. Sometimes they're beginnings in disguise. Months later, we sat together in a small cafe 2 towns over. Adrian had found a new position at a private research institute. I was still finishing my degree, still writing papers, still stumbling my way through life. But we were together. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. You still regret nothing? He asked, his eyes searching me. Nothing, I said softly. Not even the pain, because it led me here. His smile was quiet, tender, the kind that spoke of storms survived. We had risked everything. We had lost much. But what we had left, the truth, the love, the stubborn defiance, was enough. As the cafe door opened, letting in a rush of spring air, I realized something simple, something I wished I had known all along. Love doesn't always follow the rules. It doesn't always wait for permission. Sometimes it breaks you, sometimes it saves you. But if it's real, if it's true, then it's worth every risk. I lifted my cup, my hand still in his, and whispered the only vow I needed. To us. Adrian's eyes shone as he echoed. To us. And for the first time in months, I breathed freely, knowing the storm had passed. Knowing we had won. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.